So nobody's really a Hegelian, everybody's kind of neo. But if you look at Srila Sri Maharaj's teachings, especially in subjective evolution of consciousness, you'll find that he uses a lot of words that really sort of flow from this neo-Hegelian school, like the subject, the object, the super-subject, the master-slave relationship, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, consciousness. He's all about all those things. And if you study what Srila Sri Maharaj says, you'll understand why he likes Hegel. Although in the end, of course, we have conclusions that are at great variance with Hegel. But thank you for that video. That was pretty cool. I liked that man's explanation because he put everything kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah, it was very good and very basic, which is why I recommended it to my husband's men's group at church. I figured that's a good bridge from where they are into where I think they might be interested but aren't quite yet. So,
well, when I edited The Search for Sri Krishna and the Subjective Evolution of Consciousness and these different books that flowed from Srila Sri Maharaj's discourse, he would say things like, Hegel said, die to live. So I thought, well, as his editor, I should see to it that things are properly attributed. And so where in Hegel does he say that? In those days, we didn't have the internet. So I had to go to San Jose State University and hit the stacks. And I went through a lot of Hegel. But what you will find, surprisingly enough, is that Srila Sri Maharaj's thought is incredibly deep, and that he really extracts the essence of great philosophers like Hegel. So it isn't necessary to learn German. I tried learning German for a while, but didn't get very far because I got confused about die der das. In Spanish, it's very logical. The moon, she is a girl, la luna. I understand that. The soul, he is a man, el sol. But in German, you have die Sonne. The sun is a girl. Something about that was difficult for me, but I found I didn't have to read Hegel in the original German. I could rely on what Srila Sri Maharaj said. So that's an important point, because some people will study, I have friends who will study Sanskrit, thinking they really want to understand better the essence of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, different Vedic texts, and they feel that they'll do that better if they learn Sanskrit. But what you will find if you try to learn Sanskrit is that Sanskrit teachers follow different schools of thought, and that every word in Sanskrit has a philosophical bent to it. And according to whether your teacher comes from a Buddhist school or a Shankarite school, which is most of them, or maybe a Vaishnava school, that will color their interpretation of Sanskrit. And what you will find is that the greatest Sanskrit teacher who ever lived, perhaps, was His Divine Grace Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami, whose book we're studying today, Positive and Progressive Immortality. Because, for example, you look at a word like Atma. What does that mean? Well, the Buddhists have a particular idea. They'll say, well, Atma is Krishnamurti. I saw this video of him that's circulating on the internet right now. He says, Atma is a very wonderful idea that was invented by the Hindus 5,000 years ago. That means absolutely nothing because it doesn't exist. So the Buddhists will take that kind of approach. The Atma is really kind of an illusion. It's a useful illusion while we're transiting from nothing to nothing. But in the end, it's all nothing. And that's their point of view. And so their Sanskrit teachers will teach you that. So when you study Sanskrit, you should be aware that Srila Sridhar Maharaj's Sanskrit was pretty good. And so was Govinda Maharaj's. But, and then I noticed Brajasundari, she put up something about Miguel de Unamuno. And he wrote this. Miguel de Unamuno was a professor at Salamanca University in Spain. And he is really the crossroads between sort of 19th century and 20th century thought. And he did his best to put up a defense for faith. And he had this one line where he says, you can't reach the impossible without attempting the absurd. I can see Brajasundari's translating. But was that correct? Brajasundari?
Hare Krishna, dear Mahayogi Prabhu, but I do not know the original version. I do not know Spanish, so I don't know exactly. Simply my question in that post was that what does the translator meant when he used that phrase to attempt absurd? Did he play with the words like absurd attempts and to attempt absurd, or there was no game of the words? Simply he translated it straightly.
No,
something like this.
In Spanish, it's absurdo. You know, surdo, it means left, and ab means to go against. So absurdo, it means you're so far out, you're even against left. Absurdo. But anyways, he said, to reach the infinite, it's an impossible task. So in his book, he's defending the idea of faith. And for many philosophers who followed Kant and Hegel, they discarded all metaphysical things because they felt, well, anything metaphysical is by nature absurd. So Unamuno says, well, you have to attempt the absurd. You have to have faith in order to reach the infinite, something like that. But it's an interesting discussion. His favorite book was the Quixote, because Don Quixote is tilting at windmills. He's attempting the absurd in his mad attempt to reach a very high ideal. And so that's why Unamuno liked him. So in our devotee life, the idea of surrender to the infinite, and this is very absurd for most people. They won't get it. How can you chant Hare Krishna, you know? Many things the devotees do appear to be absurd on the face of it. Shaving one's head, wearing robes, living in an ashram, eating vegetarian food. All these things seem absurd. It seems absurd to me that people love their dogs so much, but every meal they have, they need to put meat on the plate. that comes from killing an animal. So how do you reconcile the two? I had a friend who was Argentinian, and the Argentinians, they love meat. Not really a friend, but a family member. You know how that goes. And he loved dogs. He used to rescue them from the street. And one day he saw I didn't have a dog. So one day he told me, you will never understand what it is to love an animal. He said as he was eating a plate of meat. And I just looked at him like, I'm sorry, but I don't understand how you can love the dog and kill the cow. But so there are many things that devotees do that appear absurd, but we're trying to understand what it is to surrender to Krishna. And this book, Positive and Progressive Immortality, is something that is meant to give us hope and strength in our journey towards surrender. So this chapter is called Goptrit Ve Bharanam Tata. It means accepting the Lord's guardianship, or embracing the Lord's guardianship. And we mentioned before, there's these two concepts of surrender that are really first organized by the South Indian acharyas, the philosophy of the cat and the philosophy of the monkey, where the cat just accepts that its mother is going to pick it up and move it if there's any danger. The monkey has to hold on for dear life. So Rakshasyatati Vishvaso Goptrite Bharanam Tata. In Rupa Goswami, we find these two divisions of surrender, accepting the Lord's guardianship and then embracing the Lord. So it's something like, if you're at school and there's a bully, and you tell the bully, my brother's going to get you. It means I trust my brother's going to come and take care of this. That's a little more passive. The other is more like crying out and saying, help me, O Lord, I'm helpless. I'm not just sitting here passively waiting for Krishna to protect me, but I'm proactive. I'm doing everything I can to ensure that I am indeed protected. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj begins this chapter. Hey Krishna pahimam nata kripayatmagatam kuru iti evam prarthanam Krishnam praptam swami swarupataha. He says, hey Krishna, pahimam.
Bluetooth mode. Connected.
Hey Krishna, pahimam. Oh Krishna, please protect me. And then Srila Sridhar Maharaj, this is the kind of prayer, prarthana, that we should have. Such a prayer, as well as the prayer to obtain Sri Krishna as one's Lord and Master, is the supreme solace to the hearts of the pure devotees, and is known by them as Goptritre Bharanam. Embracing the Lord's guardianship, because it expresses one and the same ideal as unconditional surrender. So then Goptritre Bharanam is accepted as the chief of the 6 limbs of surrender. So that's interesting, because it means that it's favorable to accept what's favorable for Krishna consciousness, and it's good to reject what's unfavorable for Krishna consciousness. But this idea, oh Krishna, please protect me, my dear Lord, kindly accept me as your own. this call to God, like a baby calling out for its mother desperately. This is really at the heart of surrender. And so Srila Sri Ramakrishna continues. Now remember, this section is called Bhakti Vachanamritam. So it means this is what the devotees say. Maybe you'll see different things in the scripture given by God himself, or acolytes, or saints, or rishis, but the real devotees themselves have this to say about surrender. So if you think of all the different devotees of Krishna, who's the number one? Sri Bhagavato Bhakti Bhavena Ashraya Prarthanam. The number one devotee, of course, is Krishna himself. So when Krishna himself comes himself as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he has this to say: Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitam mam vishame bhavambudo kripaya tavapada pankaja stitaduli sadrisham vichintaya. O Nanda Nandana, although I am your eternal servitor, I have fallen into the terrible ocean of material existence due to the fructification of my own karma. Please graciously consider me to be a particle of dust at your lotus feet. So this is Sri Chaitanya Chandra reaching out to Krishna himself and saying, I'm fallen in the ocean of Vishame, Vishaya, material action and reaction. So all I want is to be a particle of dust at your lotus feet. Please accept me. And this is the attitude that we need to reach out and chant Hare Krishna. I'm looking at my notes. The idea that Krishna himself becomes his own devotee, to see what is that like, reflects the idea given by Hegel of the master-servant relationship, where the servant provides such indispensable service to the master that the master becomes captured by that, and in a sense becomes servant of the servant. So the thesis of being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master, is countered by the divine love of Srimati Radharani, the ultimate servant, maidservant. And the synthesis is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Gauranga Chandra, who here is praying that he wants to become a particle of dust. So the next verse is Sarva Sadguna Vigraha Atma Prado Harir Eva Gopkrit Vena Varaniya Kap Panditas. Srila Sri Ramakrishna points out that this idea of guardianship really is for Krishna. We don't accept any other gods before him. You may pray to some other god for protection, but this is not real surrender. And so he gives a verse here by Akrura, and Akrura says, Ka panditas tvad aparam sharanam samiyad pakta priyad ritagira surida krita gyat. Sarvan dadati surido bhajato bikaman atmanam apya upachaya pachayu nyasya. What learned person would approach anyone but you for shelter? So this is a Krura in Mathura. Mathura was a family member. He's related to Ugrasen, who is the father of Devaki, and he was sent by Kamsa to bring Krishna from Vrindavan to Mathura so that Kamsa's assassins, like the elephant Kuvalyapida and the wrestlers, would take care of Krishna. But Krishna ultimately takes care of them. And so Akrura, he says this, what learned person would approach anyone but you for shelter when you are the affectionate, grateful, and truthful well-wisher of your devotees? To those who worship you in sincere friendship, you reward everything they desire, even your own self. Yet you never increase or diminish. And Srila Prabhupada comments on this verse. He says this verse describes both the Lord and his devotees as suhrida, well-wishers. The Lord is the well-wisher of his devotee, and the devotee lovingly desires all happiness for the Lord. Even in this world, an excess of love may sometimes produce unnecessary solicitude. For example, we often observe that a mother's loving concern for her adult child is not always justified by an actual danger to the child. A grown child may be wealthy, competent, and healthy, and yet the mother's loving concern continues. Similarly, a pure devotee always feels loving concern for Lord Krishna, as exemplified by Mother Yashoda, who could only think of Krishna as her beautiful son. Lord Krishna had promised Akrura that after killing Kamsa, he would visit his home. And now the Lord kept his promise. So after having killed Kamsa, Krishna visits the home of Akrura. And Akrura is recognizing this, and he glorifies the Lord as one who is true to his word. Even if the devotee forgets, the Lord does not. You give your affection to your devotees. Your word is truth. You are the ever grateful friend. Can any intelligent person thus take refuge in anyone but you? So, again, you can come back to this problem that the atheists really love, which is if God is kind and if he loves you, then why is there so much suffering in the world? But we're not concerned here and now with these words from the atheists. What we're hearing is the words from the Bhaktas, the Bhakta Vachanamritam. And this is how the intimate devotees of Krishna feel. You fulfill the desires of the sincere souls that serve you, giving your very self to them. So this is what the surrendered souls say. If you surrender to Krishna, if you give your soul to him, then you may feel something like Akrura, who says, you fulfill all the desires of the sincere souls that serve you, giving your very self to them, and yet you are never augmented nor diminished thereby. And so people may go outside Krishna to different other gods. And today in modern society, we may ridicule the Hindu worship of gods like Shiva and Durga, but because we have better gods, we have the internet and we have money and we have sex gods, money gods, sex gods, like that. And we prefer to worship such things, just as in the time of Jesus Christ, they worshiped the golden calf. But such worship is not orthodox. because the worshipable Lord is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there may be worship of different gods, but this is not on the level of the worship of Narayan, according to Srimad Akrura. And so Srila Sri Ramar continues with his thesis here. The fifth verse of the Prapanna Jivanamritam. He points out, he says, Sri Krishna Sharanam Eva Papananam Santapaharishu Devarshi Apapratam. He says, the lotus feet of Lord Krishna are like an umbrella that shelters the suffering of his surrendered souls, showering nectar upon them. And so Uddhava, after he saw that the Yadu dynasty was on the point of leaving the planet, Uddhava approaches Krishna in a secluded place and offers him obeisances with folded hands and expresses his inability to tolerate separation from him. And he prays that he may be allowed to return with Krishna to his abode. And in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavatam, then, there's a long conversation between Krishna and Uddhava. It's called the Uddhava Gita. And this is interesting because we have the Bhagavad Gita, which is Krishna unfolding the mysteries of the Absolute to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. But then later in the Bhagavatam, we have the Uddhava Gita, where Krishna unfolds the same truths, but to Sri Uddhava. And you can see, if you read both of those texts, how the absolute truth is revealed to two different people at two different times. So God speaks the Gita to Arjuna, and he also speaks the Gita to Uddhava. But Arjuna and Uddhava are differently qualified. Arjuna is a warlike Kshatriya, and Uddhava is an educated Brahman. So how the truth is spoken, how that's revealed to two different people at two different times, but by the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's really worthy of study. And so Uddhava, as he's praying to Krishna, he says, Tapa Trayana Abhihatasya Gore Santapyamanasya Bhavadvan Isha Pashyami Nanyach Charama Tavangri Dvandava Tapadrad Amrita Bhavishasha. He says, for persons afflicted by the triple miseries, the threefold miseries, in the ghastly course of material existence, I see no other shelter but the umbrella of your holy lotus feet, from which the rain of eternal nectar showers down. And when I read this the other day, I thought, that's a strange metaphor, because normally the umbrella protects you from rain, but here it says from this umbrella, there's a rain of eternal nectar that's showering down. And I thought, is that possible? Where would you see an umbrella that squirts water? Really? Maybe that's a mixed metaphor. But then I got on Amazon.com and I looked for an umbrella that sprays water. And I found this is a popular product. You can buy an umbrella that showers a cooling mist, because sometimes it's so hot, you want to use an umbrella in its other sense as a parasol to protect you from the sun. And maybe spray, a very fine cooling mist. So here, taking shelter of Krishna, it's said to be like that. So again, the atheists are big on this idea that God is the cause of suffering, religion is the root of all evil. But we find exactly the opposite is true, that by taking shelter of Krishna, that surrender will calm us from the ghastly pains of material existence. So in this way, Krishna further instructs Uddhava. When we continue here, our next verse. So Srila Sri Rama says, Shad Ripu Taditasya Shanti Hinasya Sva Nata Charanashrayam Eva Baya Shokamrita Pradam. He says, for this disturbed soul who is flogged by his 6 enemies, only the shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Krishna awards him immortality in fearlessness and sorrowlessness. And so our next verse here is from a devotee named Muchukunda. And Muchukunda is an interesting personality mentioned in the Bhagavatam and even in the Ramayana. Muchukunda was one of the forefathers of Ram. And so after Krishna leaves Mathura, he creates this formidable fortress city by the sea named Dwarka. And many of the inhabitants of Mathura go to join him there in Dwarka and live with him. But according to Vishnu Purana, Harivangsha, the Bhagavatam, there was this cruel king, Jarasandha, and he was the father-in-law of Kamsa and the ruler of Magadha. And he attacked Mathura some 17 times, but every time he attacks, he's driven back by Krishna. He's unable to defeat Krishna. So he makes an alliance with Kalayavana, who was a Yavana king. Kalayavana, a very fierce Yavana king who received the benediction from Shiva that on the battlefield he would be undefeatable. So this terrible Yavana king, Kalayavana, he attacks Mathura with an army of 30 million Yavanas. Now, Krishna doesn't like to contravene directly things that are done by Shiva. He has great respect for Shiva. So, realizing that the Yavanas have outnumbered the Yadus, he challenges Kalayavana directly to a duel. But at this time, he runs from the battlefield, and Kalayavana chases after him. And they enter this dark cave, and Krishna somehow covers Kalayavana's head with a scarf, so he's temporarily blinded. And this cave is where the great king from the Treta Yuga, the forefather of Ram, Muchukunda, is sleeping. He's in a deep slumber for thousands of years. Now, he helped the Devas in a war with the Asuras, but he was given a boon that he could rest as long as he wanted. Indra Dev blessed him that whoever dared disturb his sleep would get burned to ashes immediately when Kalyavana opens his eyes. It's a bit like this character in the X-Men who wears these glasses, but if he raises the glasses, he can burn you with his glance. So here's Muchakunda sleeping peacefully in the darkness, and Kalyavana enters this cave, and Kalyavana removes the scarf, and he sees there's somebody sleeping there. And Kalyavana thinks that must be Krishna. It's a little dark. So he kicks Muchakunda and wakes him up. And as soon as Muchakunda opens his eyes, he reduces Kalyavana to ashes. And then Muchakunda turns around and opens his eyes and yawns a bit. And he sees, oh my goodness, there's Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Krishna, of course, advises him to perform some tapasya to cleanse his accumulated sins. And from there, he travels to Gandhamadana mountain and then to Badarik ashram, where he does penances. But here, Muchakunda prays to Krishna, and he says as follows: Chiram miha vrijinartas tapyamanon nutapar avritrisya shadamrito labdashanti katanchit sharanara samupetas tadpadabjam paratman abhayamritam shokam pakimapanam misha. So Muchakunda turns to Sri Krishna and falls on his knees and prays. And he says, "O Supreme Lord, for time immemorial in this material world, I've been tormented with sin, stung with remorse, and constantly harassed by my 6 insatiable enemies, the 5 senses and the mind. O gracious awarder of shelter, somehow I have come before your lotus feet, which are the embodiment of fearlessness, sorrowlessness, and positive immortality. My master, please protect this one distressed." So this powerful king takes shelter of the holy lotus feet of Sri Krishna and prays because he says, you are the embodiment of fearlessness, sorrowlessness, and positive immortality. I have to check the time. All right. Then Srila Sridhar Maharaj continues describing what it means to surrender. He says, the next thing that develops in surrender is the realization of the fact that the surrendered soul who discovers his eternal identity and denounces this perversity caused by the association of lust, anger, greed, madness, delusion, and hatred, and is rescued forever from all evil pursuits by the devotional service of Sri Krishna. And he quotes from a verse that's found in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The verse says, Kamadinam katina katida palita durni deshas tesham jatamayina karunana trapa no pashanti utsrijaitanata jadupate sambratam labda buddhis tvam ayata sharanam abhayam mam niyungshvat madasye. Oh, my Lord, there's no limit to the unwanted orders of lusty desires. Although I've rendered these desires so much service, they have not shown any mercy to me. I have not been ashamed to serve them, nor have I even desired to give them up. O my Lord, O head of the Yanu dynasty, recently, however, my intelligence has been awakened, and now I am giving them up. Due to transcendental intelligence, I now refuse to obey the unwanted orders of these desires, and I now come to you to surrender myself at your fearless lotus feet. Kindly engage me in your personal service and save me. So again, we can point out the root of all evil is not religion, and the cause of suffering in this material world is not some cruel God who has created this world to make us suffer. On the other hand, we have turned away from divinity. And why? For the sake of our masters, kama arinam, our masters such as lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, and envy. And we've served these masters. And what have we gotten as a consequence of serving these masters? We're ensconced in the wheel of birth and death, of samsara, taking birth again, going through the cycle of growing up, reproducing, producing something, getting sick, old age, death, and then birth again, because this is what we want. We're determined to enjoy material life in the material world, separated from divinity. And it's our separation from divinity that causes us to suffer karma in this material world, not any scheme created by divinity to make us suffer, but the unlimited, unwanted orders of our lusty desires. But here, the devotee who is uttering this prayer is saying, that's enough. He says, "Oh, head of the Yadu dynasty, recently my intelligence has been awakened, and now I'm giving up these desires. And not only do I refuse to obey the unwanted orders of these desires, but I'm coming to you to surrender myself at your fearless lotus feet." Because the Buddha, he also points out that the cause of suffering in this world is desire. But it's not enough to simply give up desire or give up ego. That may be a form of immortality, but it's not that is not positive or progressive. That doesn't unfold or develop. It's not, as we were saying before, Hegelian. There's no thesis, antithesis, synthesis. There's no becoming or growing in the negative nirvana of the Buddha. So here the devotee is saying, now I understand. Ayata sharanam abhayam. Tam ayata sharanam abhayam. Mam niyung shvatmadasye. In your service, atmadasye, I'm finding shelter, sharanam. And in this way, I'm becoming not only abhaya, or free from fear, but transcendentally blissful. And Srila Prabhupada, in his comments in Chaitanya Charitamrita, where this verse is found, he says, this verse is also quoted in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. When we chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, we are saying, Hare, O energy of the Lord, O my Lord Krishna. In this way, we are simply addressing the Lord and his spiritual potency, represented as Radha Krishna, Sitaram, or Lakshmi Narayan. The devotee always prays to the Lord and his internal energy, or consort, so that he may engage in their transcendental loving service. When the conditioned soul attains his real spiritual energy and fully surrenders unto the Lord's lotus feet, he tries to engage in the Lord's service. This is the real constitutional position of the living entity. So that's my prepared talk. And it's time for me to say hello to Dandi Maharaj. Hello, Dandi Maharaj. Hare Krishna. It's good to see you. I enjoyed very much your commentary the other day when some people were discussing some sort of, I can't remember quite clearly, some sort of astrological event. But you know what I'm talking about. We'll leave it there. Anyways, it's good to see you, Maharaj. Can you say hello? Dandavad. Hare Krishna.
Very nice to see such a beautiful community of devotees there.
It's good to see you. And happy, good vibrations, peace, love, sunshine, Prabhupada, to all the devotees out there in Ukraine and Russia and around the world. You know, we're going through difficult times right now. Things are not so easy, but things are never really easy. It doesn't matter how hard you try to make things easy. There's always details because we're in this material world. So the best that we can do is chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Let me see who else is on here. Anyways, I always remember Dandi Maharaj. We had a great time there in St. Petersburg. We went through the Hermitage Museum. Hermitage. We went through the Hermitage Museum and commented on all the terrible art there and some of the good art we saw. It's a very interesting museum. I also saw the Pushkin Museum, but I think that one's in Moscow. Hare Krishna, Rasananda. Good to hear from you too. Yeah, I saw it in the Pushkin Museum I think it's in Moscow. There they also have a good collection. But there they had the mask, the golden mask of Agamemnon and the tiara of Helen of Troy. And in a glass case, they had these different funny things they found in the ruins of Troy. And one thing that really impressed me is inside this glass case, there's this big magnifying glass like this. And underneath the magnifying glass, there's a little piece of metal. And I thought, what's this? So I read the description. And because I'm thinking, what is this little tiny piece of metal they have underneath the magnifying glass? And the description says, a crystal magnifying glass found in the ruins of Troy. And what they're showing you is they have these giant magnifying glasses. Maybe they used them as weapons. Who knows what the ancient science of the Vedic world held? It's a mystery. Let me see who else is on here. Vrindavan Chandra's here, Ajita Krishna. Yeah. Leelavati, Krishna Chaitanya Das, Rasananda, Abhiram, Gadadhar, Anjali. Anyways, I'm so happy to see all of you again. It gives me great heart. I'm told it's going to be Madhusudana Maharaj's birthday is on Saturday. And somebody invited me to something for that, but I'm not sure if they're on here. Let me just check my messages. Is that Facebook, Twitter? I can't remember. Anyways, somebody invited me to that, but I can't do it. I have to, I have some responsibilities I have to take care of. I don't see that. There's so many different, I heard this. Okay. No, that's Narayani, Nalina Sundari. This is a different Nalina Sundari. Okay. Well, what do you think? she shared a file, somebody. Aha, Marie, oops, I lost Zoom. No, I'm going to check the chat. Oh, there it is. Yeah, thank you. Maria Gork shares the file. The 2nd of September will be the appearance day of Srila Bhakti Ranjan Madhusudan Maharaj. So take a look in the chat. You'll see that you can participate in that Zoom there. And I'm looking at, I don't usually look in the chat because I'm trying to control what I'm saying. Humble Dandavat to Mahayogi from Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat 360 to everyone. Thank you very much. Okay, so yeah, if you get the chance, try to participate in that. His actual birthday, I thought it was in August, but I suppose that's calculated by his moon day. I have the same solar birthday as Govinda Maharaj. Not that that means anything, but he came into this world on calendar, Western calendar day of December 17th. And so did I, but years apart and universes apart as far as any sort of spiritual realization. But I take a certain dim pride in knowing that. This year there was a Purushottama month. That's why. Thank you very much, Vrajasundari. So what do you think, Vrajasundari, about Miguel de Unamuno?
Dear Mahayogi Prabhu, I need to ask you to give me the name of the book where he gave this quotation. I tried to find it out in the internet when I was thinking about it, because I thought that maybe the best variant would be simply to find this book in Russian and to find how Russian translators translated it. But I didn't manage to find out what book.
See, Rajasundar, you think like me. I went to the library and I looked at Phenomenologia des Geist, by Hegel, and I tried to find, where does he say die to live? But in a stack of books like that, if you want just a quote, you can look in Chat GPT, where does Unamuno say, embrace the absurd to reach the impossible, or you can try Google, you'll find it. But look up like this, Miguel de Unamuno quotes absurd. You'll see it right there. As far as a book to read, he wrote this book called Tragic Sense of Life, and it's got a lot of great stuff in it. It's not a devotee book, right? But most of the folks who are listening to my program are kind of preachers, like Dandi Maharaj. He's a preacher. He knows Mahayogi is going to say many ridiculous things, but maybe there's something in there he can use, maybe he'll, tragic sense of life. That's good for preaching to Catholics, maybe, or Spanish people, or even scientists. Unamuno, like his friend Jose Ortega y Gasset, they're kind of philosophers, but they don't really get credit for being philosophers. I made Nirupama Didi laugh. There, she's smiling or something. Yeah. They don't really get credit for philosophers. They're more like writers or thinkers. But that's kind of the way the Spanish are, So people won't take Unamuno that seriously, but he was a very serious guy. He was the head of Salamanca University, which is the big school in Spain about 100 years ago. So his book is called Tragic Sense of Life. El sentido trágico de la vida. I might have it on my shelf. It's up there somewhere. It's on my shelf over there. Sentido trágico de la vida. And because what he's talking about is in the 20th century, faith really fell apart for a lot of people in a lot of countries, especially in Spain. There was a big conflict. And so he was trying to defend the idea of faith. Why have faith? So it's kind of interesting. All right. Thank you all very much for your time. I'm going to say adios, goodbye. Dandi Maharaj ki jai ho. Madhusudan Maharaj ki jai ho. Bye-bye.
Mahayogi Prabhu ki jai. Jai. Oh, he already disappeared. Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Hare Krishna. Happy to see you.
Враджа, а у вас есть какие-нибудь ссылки о завтрашнем событии? Потому что я что-то ничего не нахожу.
Они опубликованы. Я могу, Махарадж, я могу вам прислать. Вот, я могу вам прислать. Они были опубликованы в группе Махамандала в Телеграме. Если вы входите в эту группу, то там они... Вот на английском языке есть, потому что я вижу пересланную как бы ссылку с англоязычного Махамандала. Вот. Харе Кришна. Примите, пожалуйста, поклоны. Харе Кришна.
Дандават.
Yes. Дандават.
Дандават, Махарадж. Очень рада вас видеть всех. Дандават.
Hare Krishna, please accept my obeisances. Дандават, bye-bye. Харе Кришна, примите поклоны. Дандаваты. Харе Кришна, Нирупама. Амяшчи, обнимаю тебя. Дандават. Пока-пока.